MMSA's Navigating the Career Environment in 2020 events. It's great to see you all here. I would love to see some camera if you're comfortable, but obviously it's not required. I will let you also know this event will be recorded and posted later on YouTube. So you can always access it later if there was something that you wanted to go back and look over. So just a bit of a welcome. So I'll be your host for this evening. She'll be watching the chat and answering any questions if you need any help with anything at all. She'll also be sending in some information as well later on. Cool. So just a bit of an intro to who I am. So I'm Kaylin Chapman. I'm a current marketing student at Macquarie University and a director at MMSA. So some of you who aren't already familiar with our society, I'll just give you a quick run through. So who is MMSA? We are a student-run organization which currently aims to present a range of opportunities to students currently studying business, marketing, management at Macquarie University. So MMSA encourages students to reach their full potential and make the most of their degree while studying at the university. We do this through creating links from students to industry professionals and helping them reach their career objectives. So MMSA runs both professional and social events, such as the one that you're joining now. If you are interested in joining, we will be posting a link in the chat later on. Cool. Just a bit of an event overview. So the aim of this event is to provide both current and undergraduate students with advice on how to get graduate positions, and Jeremy will be doing an amazing presentation and speech about the different roles and routes that you can get after finishing graduate and how to navigate through these. So also this event has been approved by GLP. So if you are in the process of completing GLP, you can claim points for it under code GLX30. So this will get one of your two events. So to make sure that you are able to get points at the end of this, please make sure you screenshot our last slide. And then you can send this through and by completing the GLP seminar online event form. Cool. So let's meet your speaker. So speaking today, we have Jeremy. He's a alumni, MMSA or Macquarie University student. So he has a bachelor's degree in marketing and media. He's the current account director at Prosple and works as a marketing manager at Graduate Australia. So Graduate Australia is Australia's #1 graduate attraction network, and he knows a lot of information about what recruiters are looking for, and it's definitely going to give you lots of information to help you stand out from the crowd and get some really good information on how to go about navigating this new environment. Obviously, there has been a lot of changes, rapidly changing things thanks to COVID, so he will be giving you a lot more information about this and hopefully helping you out in getting some graduate positions. Awesome. I'm going to hand over to Jeremy. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the introduction, Kaylin. It's definitely talked me up quite a bit, so thank you. Probably a little bit too much, but we'll see. Nice to meet you all. As Kaylin mentioned, I'm just going to share my screen and I'll pop into it. So before I do get stuck into it, I want to say thanks to the team for inviting me on. At the end of the day, throughout this entire presentation, it would be great if anyone does have any questions. We do have a question and answer section sort of at the end. Although if you do have a burning question, just unmute yourself and ask. More than happy to have an open discussion throughout. So just to get into it, essentially, what I want to go through today, and if there's anything I want you to get away from this, is that I'm not going to be going through the best ways in which you should be writing a resume. I think that if there are any students out there, who have a little bit of drive and have the ability and the initiative, you can go to Google, and that's something that you can find out quite easily. And to be honest, that's not what HR managers and graduate managers are actually looking for. They're not looking for the shiniest resume. They're looking for a person who is the best fit for their particular sort of company. So with this in mind, I'm going to be talking you through a bit of a top-down process around what your options are by talking about my journey and what my choices were, talking about what your options will be from a series of 3 different options. I'll go through a series of statistics as well, talking about how the graduate environment has changed due to COVID-19, and there'll be a few other sort of tips and things in between that. So yeah, more than happy to take any questions throughout the process. One thing I do want to make abundantly clear as well is that I do not want to be talking about myself for an hour, and I actually will not be doing that. The idea here is that I want to give you just a taste of my journey, so then you can have some clarity in your own journey. And maybe there might be some experiences that I've made and even mistakes that I've made that you won't have to make yourself, and I can just pass on my knowledge if we can go like that. Whilst I have been working at Grad Australia and Prosple, it's one in the same company, and I'll get to that in just a moment. The idea here is that it's always important, and this is one of the things that I kind of want to lead with, is that it's always important not to put all of your eggs in one basket. It's a pretty renowned term, and everyone constantly says this same thing in many different sort of spaces and industries. But the idea here is that when it comes to your career, do not invest in just a single thing. Have your fingers in many different pies, try different things. I myself, whilst working at Prosple and Grad Australia, I've run 2 different startups with relative success, but that's not even the point. The point is just that you're doing different things and finding out different things that you love. It's also really important to constantly upskill throughout the process. So I'm going to get into this in greater detail, but that's just a bit of a taste in terms of what we're going to be talking about today. So essentially, I'm going through here in terms of what I actually do as an account director at Prosple and Grad Australia. So yourselves being students currently at Macquarie University, you'd probably know about Grad Australia. Potentially, you might have seen that big blue book being passed around. I know Rachel's grabbed a few copies. But the idea with this is that essentially what Grad Australia is a single network that falls underneath the umbrella company that is Prosple. So Prosple is actually a technology provider with a series of around 85 different networks, with Grad Australia just being a single one of them. And what I do within my role is I actually work with a range of different institutions, so universities, registered training organizations, employers, and students such as yourselves, in terms of actually just helping everyone get the most out of the education experience. And so to kind of build on this without going into too much detail here, when I work with institutions at Prosple, the idea is that I'm probably working with about 25 different universities currently out of the 41 across Australia. And what I'm doing with these different universities is assisting in building up the amount of students that are enrolling into their courses. We work with Macquarie Uni on several different occasions. And the idea here is that we are advertising for these different institutions to help them sort of advertise their courses, show what their value proposition is, and entice students into signing up to their courses. And given the current climate with COVID-19, this is more important ever now, in particular when it comes to domestic students. When it comes to employers, this is a completely different kettle of fish. Employers are looking for graduates and interns, of course, but the thing is that they're looking for a very particular kind of graduate. So they're looking, depending on the institution and depending on the field, they're looking at different students that are the best fit for their organization. I'm going to go into more detail about this later, but the idea here is that they want great branding. They want to increase the retention of the graduates that come online, because at the end of the day, that does really well for their ROI. Okay, if you get a graduate that stays on for several years, that is going to be a massive plus, as opposed to grads that are swapping out every 6 months, every 2 years, or whatever the situation may be. So they're thinking long term, and they want the best talent from the start. It's actually quite a sound strategy to be investing in graduates and interns from the get-go. And then from here, we work with students. And at the end of the day, students are a way in which we sort of begin with the end in mind. So we work with institutions and we work with employers, but at the end of the day, it's students that are the key focus of this. Students are the ones that we're assisting in making better decisions as to which institutions they'd like to go and study at, and then conversely, which employers are best suited to them. Okay, so the idea here is that to make the graduate space and the postgraduate space, the undergraduate space, all of these different areas. We want to make them more accessible to students. We want to help students make better informed decisions and help them gain valuable skills and expertise. So this is something where this is essentially the why of what Prosple is about. We're about building the education space out. So one thing that I do want to touch on at this particular point in time is that Prosple is actually a remote working company. So we, believe it or not, were working remotely before it was cool, before everyone else, had to work from home because of COVID. And so this is a sign of things to come. And in my personal opinion, I believe that the COVID-19 situation has accelerated the adoption of remote working lifestyles, probably by about 10 to 15 years. And this is something that I'm sure you might have some additional questions on, because at the end of the day, if you're looking at some of these roles that are out there, particularly in sort of tech focused roles and other sort of marketing positions, they can all be achieved remotely. And this is something where you really need to jump on board and just adopt this particular lifestyle if it's for you. We'll get into this a little bit later as well. So please forgive my copy and paste skills on this particular slide, but I essentially took a few different logos from employers that I've actually worked for, and just to give you a bit of an understanding about my journey. And so essentially I graduated from Macquarie University in 2016 now. I graduated with a Bachelor of Media and Marketing. I did well. I didn't do great. I was probably got a high credit to low distinction average across the majority of my subjects, which, you know what, it actually doesn't say too much in terms of the long term. I haven't really had a single employer come to me at any particular point and ask for my GPA and have that actually influence the conversation. So the key thing that I'm trying to emphasize here is that you actually need to be working towards learning outcomes as opposed to results. It obviously depends on the industry in which you're going into, but if you are actually taking on and learning things and becoming a sort of better, prospective employee, then that's what you're going to be working towards. So just to give you a really quick sort of insight into my own personal journey, I used to work in a nightclub when I was working at Marquee, which is at the Star in the City. That's well closed down now, thankfully. No, I'm kidding. But I was working there while I was at university, and then outside of university, just a bit of fun, just getting a bit of expertise in the hospitality industry, as many of you might have worked in hospitality before COVID. From here, it's like, okay, let's be serious. Let's start to get roles within your own industry in terms of what I studied at university. So that's when I applied and got my first sort of professional role, which was at Foxtel. So I worked at Foxtel for a few years, worked in the marketing department there, also worked in the on-demand department, which was actually quite a bit of fun. And essentially the idea here is that Foxtel, I kind of got to this point where it was this large conglomerate company, thousands of employees, and it wasn't really for me in terms of the long-term. When I was thinking about what I was actually doing there and if I wanted to be a part of this really large hierarchical structure. And so as I sort of left Foxtel, I realized maybe big business isn't my forte. Maybe it's not where I see the most sort of value for myself. Now, this by no means is everyone's journey. This is simply mine. And so I took a bit of a left turn, jumped into real estate. It was a brief stint, didn't love it. Not many people do. But the thing is here is that I learned some incredible skills in real estate that actually set me up for the rest of my roles. So as much as it was about a year or so in real estate, it was extremely valuable in terms of learning how small businesses work, learning about marketing strategies at a most basic and fundamental level. And then from here, I moved on and went into video production and as an account manager at a video production company. And this was fantastic because this was a bit more in line with my passion, which was directly essentially just digital video marketing. And so working there for about 2 years or so was a really valuable experience for me in terms of the way in which I developed my own skills as an account manager, but then also getting an understanding from all of these other incredibly skilled and experienced people in terms of the way in which they run their marketing campaigns. Started to work with a range of high caliber clients, which, obviously boosts your professional confidence in working with, the likes of, I'm just trying to think now, we're working with Deloitte, BDO, a range of accounting firms, Stockland, we even worked for like Qantas at one point. And look, it was really incredible in terms of the brands in which we were working for. And so that was something that I just took out of that experience. And so from this point, that's when, interestingly enough, my current director and manager approached me and took me on into Grad Australia, into a completely different capacity, which was completely remote working and online. And arguably actually not really arguably, the fact is it's been my favorite job to date. Best workplace. And at the end of the day, it was the right fit for me. It fits my lifestyle, it fits the things I want to achieve. But then at the end, as well as that, I'm also working with a range of high caliber clients and working in the marketing space, which I just absolutely love it. I don't know. There's just something about, getting a message out there and having it received at scale is something that's, it gets me out of bed in the morning. But the thing is, I didn't know that that's what I wanted to do when I first finished my degree. And I didn't know that that's exactly where I wanted to be. When I first finished my degree in 2016, Grad Australia didn't exist, or at least I think it was about 6 months old at that point. And it was like full startup mode. There was probably about 3 of my directors working in South Australia at the time, and that was it. So this is one of those things where from Grad Australia, we've now sort of developed our umbrella company, which is our tech service provider, offering tech solutions. Now, the idea here is that I've ended up here, and by no means is this the end of the road. Okay, I'm not going to die working at Prosple. The idea is that this is going to be one of those stepping stones in my life where I'm going to bring on valuable experience and really just get a lot out of working in a company that I identify with. Now, something that I want you to understand is that no two journeys are the same. Not everyone is going to have this wild ride of, dabbling in, TV and then jumping into real estate for no reason and so on. The idea here is that what you should be doing is what's right for you. But the sort of message I want to emphasize here is that there's no correct path. No matter how many marketing campaigns about graduate programs or universities are coming to you and saying, this is the best way to do something, the best way to do something is the way that works for you. Okay? So that's something that I just want to sort of hammer home in this particular slide. Moving on. So this is where I want to start making it about yourselves. And so from this point out, I want you to start envisaging what your why is, what you want to do, and where you want to do it. Okay? So this is your choose your own adventure story in a post-COVID-19 world. Now this is, do not mistake this, but this is going to be a challenge. Okay? You are literally in one of the most difficult economies, and it's going to be one of the most difficult economies in the last 100 years. Okay? No mistake about that. My next thing that I need to emphasize with this is that I don't want you to be disencouraged by that. If anything, you should see opportunity. And that's the point of this slide. Because even though a tough economy is harder to get a role, it's harder to work your way up a ladder or whatever it is you want to achieve, at the end of the day, there are opportunities that are available in a crisis. And it really takes switched on, successful people to realize what those opportunities are. So, I mean, just from a bit of a left field perspective here. So we went into lockdown, was it 2 or 3 months ago now? And that was a bit of a shock for myself and pretty much everyone I know, and I'm going to say all of the world. Okay. Now, there were a few ways to look at this, and this is the mindset that I want you to sort of take on in this discussion. And the mindset is, okay, the world is throwing this at me. I can go into lockdown and as I'm supposed to, and that's all well and good. I can go into lockdown, I can play Animal Crossing and play PlayStation, or I can go into lockdown and see it as an opportunity. I can see this as a time in my life where I can go and read those books on the shelf that have been sitting there for 3 years and I'd always told myself that I'd read. I can go and take this time to go and search an online course on Udemy and learn how to program. I can go and essentially just learn how to use Premiere Pro or Adobe Photoshop and all of these different tools, hard skills that are, to be honest, extremely important for someone who's looking to work in marketing. Because it's one thing to understand the strategy, and then it's another thing to have the hard skills that is paired with that strategy. Okay. So use this time, and it's, it is still up for sort of discussion, and it might still happen where we might go into a second lockdown. This is possible. Okay. Do not be disheartened. See this as an opportunity. Pick something that is the hard skill that most scares you. I am very afraid of coding. I was very bad in the course that I had to do. I can't remember which subject it was at Macquarie, but I was shocking, like really not great at coding. But it's with that I know this is this area that I need to improve upon. And so with that particular area, I'm now registered to do a fully fledged coding course. And with any hope, if we go into lockdown, I can completely finish it. This is like a 200-hour course to be done from home. And wish me luck, everybody, but we need to give it a shot, right? In the first lockdown, and this is one of those things that I want to kind of emphasize about seeing things as an opportunity. Okay. In the first lockdown, I was kind of looking around and it's like, okay, yeah, I want to be productive. I want to get all these things done, but it's like, I kind of want to do something new. I want to flex my brain in a new way and learn something completely different. I noticed that during the lockdown, which actually seems forever ago, YouTube had the highest viewership on record in all of its history. And for YouTube, that's huge, right? Because there's such a massive platform owned by Google and all the rest of it. So during the first lockdown, I went and just started my own YouTube channel. Relative success, don't want to talk about that now, but the idea here is that it's like you see that opportunity, you see, okay, there's increased viewership. There's something here where it's like, I can learn something new. I might be able to benefit. And, no employer is going to see the fact that I have a YouTube channel and be like, I want to hire you. That's not the point. The point here is that the skills and expertise that I will receive from learning how to develop video, from learning how to research, different topics and talk about things in a bit more of a presentable way makes me more employable. Okay. That's the sort of key message I want to send home on this particular slide. So here are your options, and please reflect. Okay. And please keep in mind that these are not the only options to you, but we've got graduate jobs, we've got small business / entrepreneurship, and then we have postgraduate study. Now, these are just some really top line points, but from a graduate job, your key sort of notes here is that you're only really going to be working with really large employers, mostly. If that is for you, fantastic. A graduate job is a great way to get a lot of experience and to get a lot of training. Okay. There's every graduate program, not every graduate program, but the majority of graduate programs have rigorous training associated with them. Okay. And so if you go into a graduate program I'm just pulling a name out there, but if you jump into a graduate program with Deloitte, they're not going to just take you on and throw you in the trenches. The idea is that they're going to bring you on, they're going to partner you up, give you a mentor, really without having a different sort of phrase on there, they're going to hold your hand to a particular degree, which is actually fantastic. And the reason being is that it's actually a bit of a challenge to transition out of university and then jump into a graduate role, or even just a full-time position. It's a bit of a shock. You're used to, waking up at whatever time you like to wake up, before your lectures at uni, go and get your coffee, chat to your friends, all that sort of thing. In the sort of real world, or full-time working for corporate entities, yeah, you still get to go for your coffees, but it's a little bit more stringent than that. Okay, so there is a bit of a transitionary period which you do need to become accustomed to. Another key advantage of a graduate role is that every HR manager is hiring a graduate for the long term. No one ever hires a graduate thinking, oh, I'm going to get rid of them in 6 months. No. Graduates are cheap in the short term. They are skilled and they are eager. Okay. And what this means is that they're actually hiring their future leaders. The really switched on HR and graduate managers know this. They know that what they're hiring for in their graduate program is hiring for the next CEO of the company. Okay. That's their train of thought. And so when you go for a graduate job, you need to have that same mindset that you're going to be going for the long term and you are going to essentially jump in and be loyal towards this particular company because that's what they want, right? They don't want to have to swap you out with a different grad every few years or whatever the case may be. The idea here is that you jump into the program, you undergo rigorous training, you're accustomed to the company culture, you're built in, you're a part of the furniture, you'll stay there for 30 years. It's for some people. It's not the path that I took. I definitely, in hindsight, could have taken that path and it would have been a lot of fun, but it's just not the path that I took. So it may be the path for many of you, and I'm about to go through a few ways in which you should go about doing that. The second of which is small business / entrepreneur. Now, this is, it's probably the hardest of the three, to be honest. There's a lot of responsibility. And at the end of the day, it has a lot of really key positives and a lot of really difficult negatives. I will get into this in a bit greater detail later down the track, and you know what the positives and negatives are. But the idea here is that there's no clear path for you. Okay, the CEO of Canva, who's one of our clients, she graduated university with a marketing degree, did not start a graduate role, and just went straight into starting her own business. Now, don't get me wrong, that takes a lot of courage to achieve. And she has literally gone and built a $6 billion company in a period of a few years from just leaving university. I don't know exactly how many years it was, but the idea here is that she knew what she wanted, she had the drive, and she just went out and got it. And you know what? Hats off to her. She's now the CEO of her own company that's worth $6 billion. Like, if that's what you want, good job, right? From here, we have postgraduate study. Now, postgraduate study is one of those areas where if you know what you want to do and you want to become an expert in your field, this is perfect for you. If you really enjoy the university lifestyle as well, this is a definite positive sort of step that you can take. I personally did not take this step, but my girlfriend did. She went and did her master's in interactive design and is immensely successful with it. It opens a lot more doors for you, and it allows you to jump into higher caliber roles from the get-go. So she graduated from the University of Sydney, and then straight from that position, she essentially just jumped straight into a role that was above a graduate. Now that has its positives and negatives in terms of, you know, she didn't get as much training from the employer herself, but then at the same time, she missed out on the sort of camaraderie of a graduate job, and I guess all of the other sort of advantages that come with that. So jumping into this, finding a graduate job in the post-COVID-19 world, crazy world that we're in at the moment. Now, I just want to give you a bit of an insight into what it's actually like, into what a graduate / HR manager is actually thinking. So the way in which you can currently go about this, you can obviously start off with an internship. This is a great way to get a feel in terms of what a graduate job will actually be like once you join. It's pretty straightforward. Companies which match with your why. This is a great way to find the right employer. So if you have a particular thing that gets you up in the morning and you know what that is, power to you, that's fantastic. Try and find a company that aligns with that key why. If there's a company that you like their ethos, you like their management team, you like their product, or you like their service, if you're passionate about it, fantastic. Go and try and, work with them or work in that field. The question is that, and this is the situation for many of us, is that no one really knows exactly where they want to work. Okay. This is something where it's like, you know what? I know I want to do marketing, or I know I want to do media, or whatever the case may be. I want to do this, but in terms of which is the perfect company for me to utilize my skills and grow as an individual and then as an employee and climb the corporate ladder or whatever it is you'd like to do, you really don't know at this particular point in time. If you do, you're an outlier. Okay. And good on you, because, that's great. But what I'd like to sort of emphasize is that making that decision is extremely difficult in terms of getting that understanding. So the way in which you can do it is you've just got to do your research, right? So you can approach different HR managers, talk with employees about, the different, opportunities that are available, and sort of get a feel for different companies. But then, and obviously this is one of those key things that I am going to tell you about, is go to gradaustralia.com.au. Now, as a bit of a insight here, gradaustralia.com.au is, honestly, I kind of wish it was around when I was graduating from uni, because I probably would have made some very different decisions. To be completely frank, I didn't know the opportunities that are available to me when I was graduating. So I feel like that makes a very big difference. So just to show you what I'm talking about, and I'm not sure if you've been on this site before, but this is Grad Australia. Now, as a student, just to sort of put myself in your positions just for a moment, you come to our homepage and you say, I'm looking for a graduate job, virtual internship, virtual experience. Let's start with graduate job. We're going to go business and management, most related to marketing. Search on here, and then we can sort of narrow it down on the left-hand side according to, where you want to work, which sector you want to work in, and so on and so forth. And we've got all of the roles that are automatically here. We've currently got 60 roles live that you can apply for. So one thing that I do want to emphasize here is that, I'm just going to pull up employees, is the types of content that are available on this platform to give you a firm understanding of where you'd like to work. So let me just pull up Deloitte. So say you come across a job opportunity by Deloitte. Now, the idea here is that if you're looking at this particular firm, the idea here is that you can actually see interesting content like graduate reviews. So to actually see what other students' experience was at this particular program is extremely important. We know that we're getting the highest engagement levels from students around this sort of content. This is the way in which people are making decisions these days. So graduate reviews, extremely important. In addition to this, day in the life stories is probably one of my favorite aspects. But to actually take a moment and see what a risk advisory graduate is doing in a single day at Deloitte. If you asked me that when I was first finishing university, what does a risk advisory graduate do at Deloitte? I wouldn't have been able to answer. And so what this allows you to do is get a bit of a feel in terms of like, what am I actually going to be doing within a particular role? And so it's this type of content that should be really key in terms of you making your own decision in terms of where you'd like to work. And so the point that I'm getting to here is that if you come onto gradaustralia.com.au and you search this sort of content, you can have a look at all the employers on here, you can check out their content. And the idea with that is that in checking out their content, you get a greater understanding of which employer might suit you best. Okay, because the last thing you want to do is go and work somewhere that doesn't suit you, because you'll get experience, but you could go and spend your time in a role that's more long-term, which obviously would be beneficial. With this in mind, I want to emphasize what HR managers are thinking. So to just jump into their mind for just a sec, what I want you to know is that they are purely thinking about a return on investment. And if they're not thinking that, their managers are thinking that. Okay, they need to meet KPIs, key performance indicators, in terms of different diversity groups, different caliber students, and a certain quota in terms of the amount of students. Now, what they're really looking for are good investments in terms of long-term students. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but the idea here is that they want students that align with their company culture. They want students that align, with their values. They want students that are going to be there for the long term. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard this from employers, and it's almost hilarious how consistent this message is. But they really want a student with a positive attitude. And this sounds like so simple, and it just doesn't make sense, because it's like, how can there be so much emphasis on something that is just so easy to have? But at the end of the day, you cannot teach attitude. You can teach a graduate anything, right? You put them through a course, you put them through a training program, whatever it is, you can teach students things. But the one thing you cannot teach is attitude. And that's what a lot of key HR and graduate employers are looking for. They're also really not a big fan of reneging. That ticks them off something severe, okay? Just something to keep in mind. Now, what I've pulled up for you here is just a few quick slides on some of the data around what employers are actually doing in light of COVID-19. And so in terms of the overall employment opportunities for graduates in 2021, this is a really important slide, because I do not want you to be disencouraged. You can actually see that 1.52% of this particular case study or focus group, there were, I think it was about 200 of Australian employers were surveyed here. 1.5% of them have cancelled their graduate program, okay, because of COVID. 3% have postponed it. And as you can see, the vast majority are still going ahead. And there are a few key reasons for this, okay? It doesn't make sense for large employers to just cancel their programs and just forget about graduates. There is a place for you. There is a lot of opportunity that's going to be available over the coming years, and particularly next year as well. The reason why I say this is because graduates are a very sound investment for companies. You're cheaper in the short term, and you're loyal, you work well, you work hard, you have great attitude, you're teachable. Okay, this is something to keep in mind. So graduate employers are very, they're very interested in keeping their graduate programs up to date. So do not be disencouraged by COVID thinking, oh, all the graduate jobs are just going to disappear. That's not the case. In addition to this, this talks about the application numbers in terms of the total amount of applications received by employers year over year in terms of the comparison. The majority have not received a change, and then you can actually see that the vast majority have actually increased in terms of the amount of students that are looking. So it shows that there's a bit more competition out there, okay, which is important to keep in mind. So what you can do is you can go and, fix up your resume from some tips on YouTube or Google, and that's totally fine. But I want you to roll into that interview, your video interview via Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever it will be, have the best attitude, have a smile on your face, show that you're a fast learner, and just be eager. Have an understanding of the company before you apply. Know who founded them. Have an understanding of what their values are. What's their value proposition? What's their approach to diversity? What do they do on a Friday afternoon? Like, if you can find that out and roll into call and roll into a interview and have all of this information where it's like, I didn't just send my resume to you because I needed a role. I sent my resume to you because this is the company of my dreams. That's what a HR manager wants to hear more than anything else. Moving on, and I'm not going to spend much time on this slide, but this simply talks to reneging, right? So this is where a candidate obviously applies for a role, they accept it, and then they drop out. What this shows is actually a pretty good indicator around the amount of volatility within the market and within the amount of students that have obviously applied for several roles. A single role comes through and then they just drop off the rest of them. So this is something that employers absolutely dread. And it does show that there's a lot of opportunity, right? If you've got 30% of roles being reneged on, if you haven't found a role yet, then this is a positive for you. So I didn't want to touch on this for too long, but just something I wanted to point out. So the second sort of option was, going into small business, becoming an entrepreneur. Now, this is an absolutely huge space for so many different reasons, which I'm not going to get into all of them. And, many of them are self-explanatory, but we know it's high risk, high reward. It's exciting. It's fulfilling. You get to be your own boss. You also don't get a consistent paycheck. You also get the entire of, a sale or whatever money that you bring in. Longer hours, always at work, and prior experience is extremely valuable. Now, do not be disencouraged about going down this path due to COVID-19. And do not get me wrong, in my opinion, the economy will be in a fully fledged recession soon, in my opinion. Okay. And this is just being realistic. But at the end of the day, there are a range of, and you can look this up online, there are hundreds of these companies, but hundreds of extremely successful companies started during a recession. You look at Microsoft that launched during 1975, during the oil crisis. The stock market crashed to a 16-month recession where the GDP took a hit of around, I think it was around 20%, and that was the worst in a 20-year period. You look at HP, where they started in 1939, and there was another recession there just before World War II sort of kicked off. And so GDP declined there around 19%. You had Disney, which started at the end of the Great Depression, essentially, or at the beginning of the Great Depression there. And so it just kind of talks to the fact that, yes, it's hard in terms of a difficult economy to start a business. It's harder than usual, but it doesn't mean you can't achieve success. You need a great idea, you need to be driven, and you need to just go for it. I mean, I personally have a few startups that I'm working on at the moment. I'm just going for it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, so be it, but I'll go on to the next thing and try and find something that I really enjoy. Okay. So the next part here was around postgraduate study. Okay. Now, as I mentioned before, this is not for everybody. I personally didn't get a postgrad degree. My girlfriend went and got her master's in user experience design. And essentially it was fantastic for her. She absolutely loved it. It was a really good time. And it opened a lot of doors for her in the long term as well. That being said, she also has an extremely large HECS debt to pay off. Don't forget about this. Okay. It is something to keep in mind. And so I think that postgraduate study is a great option for some people, but it's definitely not for everyone. And the reason why I say that is because at the end of the day, if you go into a postgraduate role and you rack up another $50,000 bill, is that postgraduate degree, a master's degree, going to actually fill the gap of that $50,000 debt that you've just racked up in a period of 10 years? I mean, it might, but these are the sort of questions that you need to ask yourself before you go down this path. Okay. I'm not saying there's a way to do it. I'm just saying you need to ask these questions before you just say, oh, I just want the title of being a master or being a doctor or whatever the degree is. I think you need to take the time, think about what it is you want to achieve, and then think, will this turn the dial for me? Because if you want to go and become an entrepreneur, work in a small business, or jump into a graduate role and go and step up the ladder that way, a master's degree isn't going to help you to a large extent, depending on your industry, of course. But the idea here is that there are many people who do achieve and get master's degrees and postgraduate positions, and they go on to achieve incredible things because of the knowledge they gain there. It's just one of those things where you need to do your own cost analysis there. Now, if a postgraduate degree is for you, what I would recommend, and this is another one of our networks underneath Prosple that I particularly have a particular focus on. And the website's just loading up. There we go. This is Postgrad Australia. Now, for some context here, if you are looking at a postgraduate position and you're not sure where you'd like to work, sorry, keep saying this. If you're not sure where you'd like to study, this is a fantastic way to get that understanding of a difference between the different opportunities available in the different institutions, what the value proposition of these different institutions are. So for the sake of this example, I'm going to say a business and management, and we're going to go down at the master's coursework level. We click search, and then what we can see from here is similar to the technology of Grad Australia. We can see all of the different courses that are available. This is the most comprehensive course database within Australia. We have about 16,000 plus courses listed. So if you want to go to a place where you know that you have all of your options available to you, this is the place to go. Okay, Postgrad Australia is where you're going to see these are all of the different institutions that are going to offer me a master's in business and management. And then you can obviously narrow it down further here. For the sake of this example, I'm going to go through to the University of Newcastle for a Master's of Business Administration. So we get details around this particular course, which is fantastic. Then in addition to this, we can actually look at all of their other courses. We can check out student stories, similar to the sort of content that I went through before around Grad Australia. So the idea here is that we are providing, and Postgrad Australia, Grad Australia, we're providing content for students like yourselves to engage with, to understand the difference between institutions and the difference between employers. So there's a whole range of other tabs here, which I'm not going to go through now, and you can check that out in your own time. Now, there's one other trend that I just want to touch on quite quickly as well, is that the rule of thumb here in terms of, this is data that I've pulled from the US, by the way, but what we can see is a direct correlation, some would say causation, discuss, between the enrollment in education providers, so universities or registered training organizations, and with the current unemployment rate. Okay, so as we can see, this is a pretty clear correlation here. Now, something that is important to keep in mind here is that as unemployment increases, the job market gets more competitive. And then this is why a lot of people decide to go down a postgraduate study option in expectation that once you receive your degree, your postgraduate degree, then you're able to go on and I guess get a better role and be more qualified for a position. So this is just something just to be aware of. I'm not throwing this in here to make any larger point. It's just something where it's like you need to understand that there is a correlation in terms of the amount of students and what students are doing when there's a lot of unemployment out there. So it's just something to consider and keep in mind. This is towards the end of my presentation here, and I am aware of the time, but I wanted to just plug a few books that personally kind of changed my life a little bit. And I know it's not going to be the same for everyone. The first of which that I wanted to just mention is the Daily Stoic. Now, the reason why I mention this is it's based around Stoic philosophy, which is an ancient Greek philosophy from 500 BC. And we've got like Seneca and all of these incredible people with these incredible ideas like Marcus Aurelius and all of these guys from antiquity. Now, big fan of this book. The reason why I'm recommending it now is because in the time of COVID-19, where we're all stressed out, we all have a lot of challenges in our personal lives, with our friendships, with our families, and with trying to juggle this new work from home lifestyle, I find that this particular book resonates with me, and it might resonate with you. So that's why I just threw it in there. Something that I highly recommend in terms of the way in which you can manage your emotions, keep it together, and also just be a good person. It kind of just ties back with the whole thing of just having a good attitude, because At the end of the day, if you have a good attitude and you're an entrepreneur, more people want to work with you. You'll get more business. If you have a good attitude and you apply for a graduate role, people want to hire you. They want to have you around if you're positive. And if you're into your postgraduate study, then you'll make more friends. Okay. So obviously having a positive attitude and being in the right frame of mind is extremely important here. The next book that I wanted to recommend is Start With Why by Simon Sinek. Now, this particular book, I don't personally believe is written to perfection. It's not the best writing piece, but Simon Sinek gets an absolute 10 out of 10 for the message. Okay. He does repeat himself a little bit throughout the book, but the idea here is that he literally talks about how your why, your passion, is the most important thing that you need to determine. And in terms of you figuring out what your journey should be, you need to find what your why is. Okay. You need to find out why you get up in the morning, essentially. And the thing is that, you know, being your age and I'm, how old am I? I'm 26, right? Being 26, you're not really meant to know what it is just yet. And if you do, fantastic. But the whole thing is that if you're going out there and trying to follow a particular career progression, you need to know what it is you're passionate about. And if you don't, then you need to go out and try as many different things as you can until you find that one thing that you're passionate about. So that's why I put that book in there. Feel free to read at your own discretion. The final book here that I put in is 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari. Fantastic writer, if no one has heard of him before. This guy talks about how the world is changing and the different possibilities within it. I'm not going to get into too much detail here because I'm not going to do it justice. Absolutely fantastic writer, where it's essentially, he kind of solidified in me that the unconventional journey could be the best path for me. Okay. So it's one of those things where it might just get you to think about things a little bit differently. Cool. Final thoughts that I'm just going to close off with here. COVID-19 is changing the economy really quickly. Okay. Be aware of this. You already are, but expect it. Don't let it disencourage you. Be encouraged. Be empowered by it. Okay. I want you to go and join a community of like-minded individuals. And I think this particular association is fantastic. I think it's great that you have an association where, like-minded individuals can, get together and talk about things. I think that's, and help each other and, grow together. I think it's really important. The unconventional path is more relevant than ever now. Given the fact that you're going to be working in a world where remote working is a social norm, that is unheard of. It's never happened within history. This is the first time in all of human history where remote working is socially acceptable. And so on a large scale. And so that's something that you're going to need to adjust with. And the sooner you adjust with it, the better. I want you to find your why and then follow it. Okay. That's something that's really important in having an understanding in terms of, does a particular graduate employer align with my why? Because there's no point of having the best resume, getting into the best company, if they don't align with you. You'll leave in 2 years or you'll be extremely unhappy. Either way, you got to kind of figure out which of those makes most sense. And the final thing here is just, have a great attitude to life. This is more just life advice rather than, around courses and things. But if you have a great attitude in terms of learning, in terms of the people around you and the way in which you run your life, every aspect of your life is going to be better in both your career and your personal. So maybe read the Daily Stoic. All of these are on Audible. I much prefer Audible sometimes, so highly recommended. But yeah, that's the end of my presentation. So thank you again for your time. Happy to open the floor to any questions or have a discussion. Yeah, I need some water. So.
Yeah, just want to say thank you so much for an amazing talk. Would love for you all to stay around, obviously, for some questions. I think we will take a quick photo as well for the event. If you want to stop screen sharing for a second.
Yep.
Great. Awesome. So everyone who does have their camera on, smile, that would be great. And people who don't, if you want to turn your camera on, you can. If you don't, that's all good. Okay, perfect. So we're open for questions and discussions. Good to see. Anyone can ask questions by unmuting, or we can obviously do it also through unmuting your microphone, or just through the chat as well.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Fine.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hey,
Hey, I've got a question specifically about Ray White and real estate. It's a two-part question. You mentioned you learned a lot of incredible skills, but you also said many people don't enjoy it. So I wanted you to clarify on both of those.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Really good question, because I had very little idea about Ray White and real estate before I sort of jumped into the industry, which is probably part of the reason why I got into it, just because I didn't know much about it. So from a sort of fundamental perspective, real estate is the sort of like in the trenches, one-on-one marketing. Like, this is the most simple direct marketing you could ever have. Okay. You've got door knocking, flyer dropping, open homes, talking to people every day. And at every single point throughout that process, you are on show. Okay. It's one of those things where, because it's such a highly competitive industry, you've got anyone that gets into real estate, not anyone that gets into real estate, but real estate is primarily people who want to make a lot of money, but haven't got a university degree to essentially get them there. So instead, what they do is they just work their absolute asses off. And you know what? Hats off to them. They know how to work hard, and you give them that. But it gets to a point where, because it's a low salary and a high commission based industry, it is a dog eat dog world out there, Marcus, when it comes to real estate. So it's like, if you are going for a listing and you're like going to talk to a particular landlord, you're going up against 3 or 4 other agents. And at that particular point in time, whoever really just gets in and is the accepted agent to actually sell the property, they're going to make, depending on the value of the property, somewhere in the realm of, just throwing it out there, maybe between like $10,000 and $30,000, right? So when you have such steep competition between a few select people, everyone knows everybody else in real estate, and to a fair degree, they're not too fond of each other when you're really just trying to one up and cut each other at any particular point in time to just get in and get that sale. Okay. This is one of those things where it was like, I didn't enjoy it because that's not really me. Like, I don't want to be in an environment where I need to like one up other people and try and like use dirty tactics and things like that. Like, I'm not that way inclined. But that being said, real estate taught me so much about how to be personable, how to talk to people, how to build relationships, and quickly. And that is something that has absolutely, like, honestly, Marcus, it's difficult to explain how much that assisted me in the roles afterwards. So as you may remember, I started to work as an account manager at a video production company straight after I finished at Ray White. I would not have gotten the job as an account manager at the video production company without being at Ray White. It just wouldn't have happened. They saw that I came in, and as soon as I finished my role at Ray White, I could talk to people a lot better than I previously could. And so it was one of those things where it's like, when you're out there, and don't get me wrong, I was door knocking. I was, talking to people all the time. It's a hard job, right? I don't know if anyone here has actually been out door knocking and being turned down several times in a day. I was chased off 2 properties once, which was a good laugh in hindsight now. And the idea here is that it teaches you something about hard work, and it teaches you something about being personable. So taking this into my discussions now with clients at Prosple and Grad Australia, working with Australia's biggest universities, working with some of Australia's biggest employers, this is something where it's honestly, absolutely invaluable. And to be quite frank, I didn't learn that from university. University didn't teach me how to work extremely hard and how to be very personable and build relationships quickly. Does that answer your question, Marcus?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot. Thanks for that, Jeremy.
No worries, man.
Cheers.
Happy to help. Anybody else have any questions?
Hey, Jeremy. I got a question.
Yeah.
So I know with a lot of grad roles, there's rigorous testing that goes along with them. I've applied to a few already, and I always keep getting rejected at the same stage of it. Do you have any tips for getting through that testing and not getting disheartened by it?
Out of curiosity, Rachel, what stage do you get?
After the what do you call it? The personality test, like all the online testing. Yeah, usually after that. So, yeah.
So is it, just to clarify, just because different companies have different processes in terms of how many steps, is it like an analytical test?
Yeah, so usually there's like a personality test, like a little quiz, and then there'll be like a numerical, like a numerical one, and like a language one, and there'll be like a problem solving one. Each one's different, obviously, but yeah, usually you only get about that far, and then it's rejection.
I understand. Okay. Look, to be honest, I don't have like a magic pill answer for you, but, and this is one of the things that I do, that I really strongly believe, is that myself personally, in my own career progression, there have always been things that I haven't been great at. Okay. And I'm sure all of you might feel the same about different aspects. But the thing is that, like, Rachel, if you're coming to the same issue, I'd actually encourage you to look at it as a good thing. Because the thing is, if you're coming to this same part every time and you can't get past it, the best thing about that is that you know what the problem is, right? You know what it is you need to work on. That's like one of the hardest things in terms of, like, you know, working in like account management and like, you know, managing people and things like this, is that it's very hard to pinpoint what it is you need to improve on. Okay. But you know exactly what that is, right? And so because you know that it's like, okay, it's the step after the personality test, it's like the, you know, problem solving test. Okay. What I would do, and could be a little bit left field, go onto Google after this and go and do there's a personality test called, and you might have already done this already, but I highly recommend it. It's called the 16 personalities test. Okay. And what this personality test will tell you is a lot of detail about what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. I actually recommend everyone to go and do this. It's super interesting, and get your friends and family. It's hilarious. But the point is that in a professional sense, it tells you what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. And then I absolutely love that, because knowing what your weaknesses are will allow you to just work on that and just practice. And so, Rachel, what I would encourage you to do, okay, if we get into the second lockdown, okay, I want you to go to Audible and do a bit of research, find an audiobook that talks about problem solving strategies. Okay. And if you can get through an audiobook or two about the best ways to problem solve, you know, in whatever capacity makes most sense or is most similar to that of the issues that you've been encountering already, and you get through an audiobook or two about that, and you do a few practice quizzes online, I would find it very hard to believe that you would not be able to overcome that one particular section after just committing time and effort towards it.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
All good. Let me know what your personality comes back as.
Oh, absolutely, I will.
It's always a good laugh.
Jeremy, just some questions to ask you.
Yeah, sure, Justin.
So, kind of like similar to Rachel's question. So, I mean, for those graduate tests, I mean, I was able to pass the numerical and the language bit, but the personality, which is I would say the hardest, because like you try to fit into the company's culture, and that's how I usually where I fail, because I personally don't lie in those tests. It's like how I act, and you know, like you can't fake it till you make it.
Definitely.
So like, I mean, like any tips on that? I mean,
yeah, totally. So just to clarify, just to make sure I've got you 100%, Justin, you're saying that it's the personality aspect of it that you're not nailing, and that's the part that you're constantly getting stuck at, right?
Yep.
Okay, so the way in which I would go about doing that, and similar to the way in which I'd argue Rachel, and the way in which I told Rachel to go about it as well, is to practice what you're not good at, right? So, I mean, like, it sounds so simple, and I don't want to just keep it as like it's such a simple conversation, but the crux of it is actually really simple. So, Justin, what I would encourage you to do, okay, if it's the personality aspect of it, go and do the personality test online, find out what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then focus on building up your weaknesses. And if that means that you need to go and, you know, I'm just throwing it out there, but like, you know, if you just join like the swim team, or, you know, you go and just go to the Macquarie, the pub at uni, and just start chatting to people and just start getting that sort of understanding of, you know, the aspects of the personality test which you didn't quite nail, and start working on those specifically. I'm not sure exactly what the questions are, so it's a bit hard for me to give an exact recommendation, Justin, but I would recommend like join a community, like I said before in my presentation. Join a community, join a swim team, join, you know, some sort of sport if you're that way inclined. I mean, if you're not that way inclined, you know, I was in a board game society at one point. So, you know, like there's literally anything that you can do. You know, I don't know if you play Settlers of Catan, but there's like some real big fan bases built around that sort of stuff. And it's just like, you can literally, you're Justin, like you are limited by your imagination in terms of what your sort of limits are here. So yeah, I hope that helps, man.
Building on to that question. So sometimes if I'm lucky, I was able to pass to the video interview stage. That's also one of my weaknesses. Do you get any tips on that as well?
Yeah, definitely. So before I applied to Visual Domain, which was where I was working as a account manager for a video production company. So before I applied for that company, I actually applied for just like all of these other roles that I did not want. Okay. This sounds really weird and counterintuitive, but I applied for all of these different roles that I didn't want at all of these other companies that I just didn't care about. But I literally did it just to interview and practice interviewing. It sounds strange, but when you're talking to someone and you're getting like all of these interview questions, which you've never actually received before, you start to actually like know what they're about to say. And if you can anticipate the questions that are coming, fantastic. If you can't, that's totally fine. And they put you on the spot and you don't do well, who cares, right? You didn't want the job anyway. So what you should do, Justin, is that instead of, you know, holding off and because you don't like interviewing, and then you finally get to that job that you want, and then you're in the interview stage and you're not sure how to nail it, don't wait to that point to start interviewing. Go and apply for other roles and start practicing interviews, even at roles that you're not realistically going to take, even if they come back to you and say yes. I know that sounds horrible, and if there's any like HR managers listening right now, I'm very sorry, but at the end of the day, like it's best for you, Justin, to go out there and practice interviewing, because I went out and probably did about 5 or 6 interviews before Visual Domain. And then I got my job there and absolutely nailed the interview. They offered me the job in the interview. And I was like, sweet, this is what I want, right? And it's one of those things where it's simple. It's practice makes perfect.
I mean, like it's the video interview. Like phone interviews are better. Just like video interviews, looking at the camera just really suck.
I 100% agree. But like there's a few key things that you can do, Justin, and you don't have to do them now, but even just practice without anyone else on the call. But what you want to do is you want to make sure your head is in the middle of the screen, right? You want to make sure that, you know, not everyone can see your bedroom or whatever's going on in the background. Although I do love your background. I think that's pretty classy.
That's just a virtual background anyway.
It's awesome. Virtual backgrounds are great.
Yeah, I mean, like...
But it's like, yeah. Sorry.
Like, video chatting with friends are fine as well, but like, just like, when you just got like stoned in like a video interview?
Yeah, look, man, at the end of the day, I feel like you need to practice and you need to have confidence, right?
Yeah,
Very
that's the
important.
point. Yep.
You know, shoulders back, good posture, head's in the middle of the screen, you know, talk clearly and articulately. I had to stutter on that one. But yeah, I mean, like, look, at the end of the day, I feel like you need to practice. Okay. That's the only way you're going to absolutely nail that one.
Thanks, Jeremy.
No worries, Justin.
Hi, Jeremy. I just had a question again in regards to interviews, but more so group interviews. What kind of characteristics are they looking for, or particularly as well, a lot of them might be Zoom interviews. So yeah, how can you stand out in those environments?
That's a really great question, Ingrid. Okay, so I haven't done group interviews for a few years. I think, and this is pretty consistent, but it depends on the industry in terms of what interviewers are looking for in the group interview stage. But consistent across all industries is like, if you were in a room with 10 other people, whether it be in Zoom or real life, and you're in a room with 10 other people and you look around you, it's pretty much a question of like, who do I want to be spending my time with, right? You look around that room, and if you've got people that are like super nervous and, you know, can't like, you know, look anyone in the eye and things like that, it's hard, right? Like it's not something where they want you to, you know, stand out and be like a massive extrovert on your own. That's definitely not what they want. What they want is someone that can be collaborative. They want someone that can work well as a team. That's why they put you in a group interview. And they want someone to have the attitude where it's like, you're building up the group. So it's like, yeah, you don't want to like just toot your own horn and do your own thing too much. But the idea is that you want to build up your own sort of profile, but while also simultaneously building up the profile of the group, right? So you want to work as a team, okay? So ways in terms of like building teamwork, experience is probably the best way, like in terms of working in a group environment. Yeah, like working on projects together with other teams. But then even before that, even before you're in the workforce, I'd say, you know, team sports is fantastic. Playing board games as a team, you know, whatever it is, it's like having that ability to speak to a group. You need an element of confidence in order to achieve that. And then once you have that confidence and you can speak to the group, you need to encourage not just yourself, but the group. So you need to be like a key contributor. Is probably one of the key takeaways that I'd be able to give you, Ingrid.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No worries. All good.
Okay. If we don't have any more questions, is anyone else wanting to ask any questions? No? All good. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks.
Good, Catherine.
Hey, Catherine, you've popped yourself on mute.
Oh, sorry.
It's all good.
Yeah, thanks so much for talking to us. So my
No
question's
worries.
a little bit similar in like how to stand out, but instead of it being, you know, a group interview, it's more, you know, those group assessments, like where you're given a task. And so I was wondering what sort of, like, how do you stand out in those specific ones?
Yeah, look, to be honest, I haven't actually completed any group tasks personally. I didn't go for a graduate role per se. So that's something where I'm not talking from experience about. I've done group interviews, but I haven't actually had to do group tasks. That being said, it doesn't necessarily mean that the principles that we've already been speaking about don't exactly apply. So if you're looking to do a group task, I mean, gosh, the last time I did a group task, I was at uni. And I mean, I know you're not like, you know, looking to be employed. You're just looking to, you know, get a pass or a credit or a distinction or whatever the case may be. But what you'd actually be wanting to do in a group task environment, similar to the question that Ingrid had, is that in contributing to the group, you don't want to just be the only one that's just like done everything, right? That shows that you can't work as a team. That's not what they want. They want you to have strong communication with your team members. They want you to show initiative. They want you to show elements of leadership if you can. But then in relation to building a task, it's like, okay, say there's, 6 people in a group. I'm just throwing a number out there, but say there's 6 people in a group. It needs to get to a point where the task is split up amongst 6 pieces. And then, 6 people have each person has their own section of said task. And so the idea here is that, they want to see that there was synergy that took place in these group tasks. It's not that one person pulled all the weight and, or 4 people pulled all the weight. They want even distribution of work, and they want clear, concise communication, because it's even distribution of work and clear and concise communication is what employers are looking for when they're, setting up group projects for grads to take on and employees to take on. So yeah, that would probably be my best insight there, Catherine.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, well, we have run a bit over time, but I would definitely love to say thank you so much, Jeremy, for all the insights, all the help. I know for a fact I'm going to walk away from this and probably figure out kind of what I want to do and what are my strengths and weaknesses as well, maybe do some personality tests. I hope everyone else has learnt a lot from this as well. Yeah, and if we're all happy to end here, yeah, have an amazing night. Thank you for joining us today.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. That was actually, really great to meet you all. And keep going. Have a great rest of your 2020. Last thing I want to say is that reach out to me and add me on LinkedIn. And, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to help out. And I also share some things sometimes about graduate positions and postgraduate options and things like that. So feel free to jump on. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.